Equifax's former chairman and CEO, Richard Smith, heads back to the Hill this morning for a third day of testimony. Smith is set to appear before the House Financial Services Committee in just under 2 hours. For a preview of that discussion, let's bring in Congressman Luke Messer. He's a Republican from Indiana and a member of the Financial Services Committee. Messer, by the way, is also the GOP policy chair. And Congressman, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, glad to be here.
So what have we not heard from Mr. Smith yet that you would like to hear?
Well, I'll tell you, Equifax has got a lot to answer for. Of course, 140 million Americans have had their personal information compromised. In my home state of Indiana, it's almost 4 million. And I don't know if either of you have gone on this website to check out whether or not you've been compromised.
We have. Yeah. Both Joe and I are in the position that we have. I think just about every adult American is.
Yeah, I've done it, and it's a problem. I mean, listen, you got to give your Social Security number, or at least parts of your Social Security number, 5 times, your birth date multiple times, attach it to your personal email. I mean, I just think for the average American, they want to know, is this really the way to best protect my information, to give you, the people that lost my information, more information? And then who's going to be liable for all this? You know, after all, most American consumers didn't pick Equifax. They just were involved in some other loan transaction, and the company they were dealing with picked it. We need to get to the bottom of what's going to happen. Most importantly, we need to get to the bottom of how we prevent this happening again in the future.
Yeah, I think this is much more concerning than just about any of the other data breaches that we've seen, because as you mentioned, you don't get to pick the company that you're doing business with or that is collecting so much information on you. It's basically every adult in the United States who has any sort of credit rating, who's ever tried to make any purchase, any major purchase. And it seems to me that the company has really fallen short, not only in the response on how they handle this, but as you mentioned, making sure that they're going to be liable for any of the damages that come from this. They've continued to say that they've put out this package. Smith continued to say this over the last couple of days. We have a package that's out there, but they will not say that they will be responsible for anything that goes wrong with this. I guess the question is, what is the government in a position to be able to do, if anything?
Well, it's going to be a challenge. Look, 140 million Americans, almost any company would struggle to meet that liability. I also have real questions about now if over half the people that have Social Security numbers are now compromised, what's that do with our broader system and the way it's been used in commerce moving forward? So, I mean, again, this is one of those dilemmas that doesn't have a whole lot of answers, but I think the American people at least want to know, what is Equifax going to do? I went through the whole webpage, and I'm still not clear even what I signed up for.
Me neither. No.
And so it's a mess.
I guess the biggest problem is that this stuff is changing and evolving so quickly that it's going to be hard for regulation and for laws to catch up with it. I mean, what's the answer to that? There's a broader issue, Congressman, I think.
Well, I know what we have to avoid. What we have to avoid is writing legislation to specific technologies, because the pace of technology moves so quickly. I think we really have to look at whether Social Security numbers should be allowed to be used in greater commerce in the way that they've been used in the past. Arguably, that system is antiquated. And I think you still could have that Social Security number used for government purposes, but now, again, with over half these numbers compromised, I think we have to think very big about what we do moving forward.
You know, the other thing that drives me crazy is not just Equifax. Equifax did this in the beginning. I think they've changed it. They basically said if you wanted to find out if you've been compromised, you had to right away any legal recourse that you'd ever have to go after them. Stuff like that is crazy, and I can't believe the number of contracts that come up every time you try and sign on to just about any website or any app that basically say a very similar thing, that you won't hold us liable for this. That stuff shouldn't stand up in a court of law, should it?
Yeah, and again, I'm a limited government conservative that wants to get government out of the way, but when you have these standard form contracts that people are essentially forced to be signed into, we need to look at making sure the consumer is protected.
Right, right. Congressman, while you're here, let's talk a little bit about tax reform and this budget. First of all, you think the budget gets passed, and will it be in a form that can also pass the Senate?
Well, we're going to get a budget passed today. It's important that we get one passed, because that's the gateway to tax reform. As President Trump has said, the American people need a pay raise, and it's long past time we give it to them through reducing the burden of our taxes on the economy and putting more money in every working American's pocketbook. But I believe that we will get a budget passed in the Senate as well, and we'll get it reconciled. We don't really have any other choice. Look, what happened in health care is not okay. from my perspective, the United States Senate is broken. It's not okay to make promises on health care for 7 years and then shrug and walk away when it got a little hard. And on taxes now, listen, this is one of the biggest things we can do to help grow wages and get this economy going again, and we need to get it done.
But is it true to think that in order to make all this happen, as you mentioned, you're a pretty conservative guy, are you going to have to give away quite a bit more in this budget than you'd like to make sure that it passes the Senate?
Well, my focus is on pro-growth tax reform. And what I know is if we want to grow the economy, we need to reduce the tax burden on the economy. And a great way to reduce the tax burden on every American is to simplify the tax code and you know, double the standard deduction so that they can essentially opt into a flat tax. One way or another, we're going to figure this out. Look, again, I think the Senate's broken. Almost every vote over there comes down to a tie-breaking vote. President Trump was in Indiana recently putting pressure on Joe Donnelly, one of Indiana's senators that could well be that tie-breaking vote.
A Democrat, by the way, we should point out.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also have been hearing that there could be a fourth tax bracket that's put in place to maintain the current tax rate on the highest earners. Would you be okay with that if it still gets a tax cut passed for people who are coming in the lower brackets?
Well, our number one priority needs to be middle-class tax relief. And so I'm open to proposals that increase that middle-class tax cut, because working Americans, working Hoosiers are who need the benefit the most. But I also want to make sure we have a tax plan that actually grows the economy. And to do that, job creators, the folks that are investing in the economy, creating jobs that will bring potentially the potential for better wages. So I think we need to be very careful there. We don't want to have a tax cut that doesn't really get the economy growing again. Because I can tell you this, if we want to pay down the debt and deficit, how we've done that in the past, the only time we've done that in modern history is when we've had 4% growth. So our number one target in these tax cuts should be, what's the path to 4% growth? And if our tax cuts lead us to that path, look, you'll have better wages, you'll have more jobs, you'll have more money coming into the federal government coffers and the opportunity to pay down the debt.
Very quickly, we're out of time, but very quickly, on this idea of SALT, on the state and local taxes, I would guess that you're not in favor of getting rid of, or I would guess you're in favor of getting rid of the deductions that states can take, or that you can take in states with high tax burdens so that you're not paying into the federal government. If something happens that you need a compromise to either put a limit on some of those things or to give those back in a big way, would you be okay with that if it got a tax bill passed, if it has to be done for politics, to get Republicans in those blue states to sign off?
Yeah, the current process subsidizes high tax states, and so I think it's a good idea to look at it. Look, again, my number one goal is growth. So what we need is a tax cut that reduces the tax burden on the American economy so we have better paying jobs in a growing economy. If we do that, I think the rest of it's negotiable.
Congressman Messer, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks.
Pretty amazing. Because, you know, living
State and local taxes.
living in New Jersey, working in New York, I know it's going to be just horrific for us. But, I mean, so other people in the rest of the country are crappy politicians in New Jersey and New York.
Keep raising taxes because they know they can get away with it because it,
you know, and you're like Illinois, they're usually Democrats.
I can't understand how it ever got into the first place. But it is
and then we're subsidizing.
If they don't grandfather it or make some slow way of doing it, it's going to collapse those economies.
They should stick to their gun. Coming up, packed